Hey guys, how's it going, and welcome back to another video, and it has been a while. But anyway, today I'm going to be explaining why personally I think Project Restart is a terrible idea and should be stopped immediately, or that really the Premier League and EFL should think of a completely different plan of how to get the seasons resumed and finished as well. If you don't already know what Project Restart is, then basically the Premier League and EFL have proposed in, I believe, the middle of June to have both the Premier League, Championship and possibly League One seasons restarted, all behind closed doors, with loads of restrictions in place taking into account things like social distancing and keeping the players safe, which will ultimately take place to conclude the current season to basically crown Liverpool as the champions, and I presume to at this time relegate the three bottom sides that eventually finish bottom in the Premier League, Championship, and vice versa, and League One, vice versa, if that continues. At the moment, it looks like League Two, the season's just going to end as it is. I'm not sure if teams are going to get relegated, but I've completely forgotten who is actually at the top of League Two, so these three teams will be promoted with the way that things stand. And everything I say in this video is correct as of the 19th of May 2020, of course. But anyway, now I'm going to talk about why I think this is such a terrible idea. Firstly, the Premier League has putting money over player safety and also club official safety, the managers, etc, and all the others who work for the clubs. Now, as you are probably all aware, Sky and BT have the rights to show Premier League games along with loads of other countries across the world, and they pay massive amounts of money to be able to have the privilege of showing Premier League matches, of course. Now, if the season was to be stopped or delayed for whatever reason, then the TV companies are going to demand this money back, which will put the Premier League and probably the EFL as well into massive financial strain, which could put them in a lot of trouble financially in the future. So it really is in their best interest to get the Premier League resumed and finished as soon as possible. Although they have set a date for Premier League matches to resume, they're not at all taking into account the current situation that the UK is in. I mean, we've just registered 34,000 deaths, which is the second highest in the world, just behind America. Yet you want to continue football when there's still consistently about 500 deaths a day and 500 new positive cases. How are you meant to justify restarting the league when we're still losing hundreds of people a day to this deadly virus? Yeah, all you want to do is just get the leagues resumed as soon as possible. When we're tragically losing all these people a day, we're still planning on how to play football. No football should be played at the moment when we have people dying every single day from this virus. It's absolutely ridiculous. And yes, the number could be going down in the next few months, but the point is people are still dying from it, and with all these deaths that are happening every day, then why should we be playing football? However, all these people who are trying to defend Project Restart, of course, are saying that yes, players play with colds all the time, illnesses and all this happen and all that. For example, Tottenham once had a massive food poisoning case. They still played, they still got through it. Teams do have illness outbreaks in their squads, but they still play through it. However, in this case, this virus is killing people on a huge basis. It's super contagious, where if you're within 2 meters of someone, then you can catch it, or if you, for example, touch a surface such as a chair, then you can still get it, and it's harming people, where the players will end up having to risk their lives to try and finish a season which at the moment shouldn't really be finished, especially with the situation that's going on. Now, Project Restart has already looked at most of these decisions and have acted upon it. I believe yesterday they passed a vote to say that training could resume, but many rules on that. Players are only allowed to be in groups of 5 where they have to be social distanced. They're not allowed to go in for tackles. They have to stay 2 meters apart. Everything has to be sanitized. I believe the pitches somehow have to be washed down. All the balls have to be disinfected, and the players have to leave the training ground in the kit they're already wearing and wash it themselves. But the thing is, when football resumes and you have to tackle in matches and all that, does social distancing just go out the window then? Just do the players all ignore it? What impression is that going to put on the fans that they're playing football on the TV? Will they be able to break social distancing and do that in the park because it's being shown on TV? This will send mixed messages to audiences that are watching Premier League football, thinking that they'll be allowed to do that when in actual fact they're not, and that they'll be risking lives to other people. And not only that, Germany have tried to do this as well, where, for example, if you're not playing, then you've got to wear a mask, and if you're one of the 5 players who are on the bench, then you have to sit 2 meters apart with a mask on. But then again, how does this work when you have, for example, Erling Haaland standing next to one of the Schalke defenders, breathing in each other's faces, where one of them could potentially have the virus? Now, I know they have obviously been tested, but what happens if one of the players caught it overnight, or one of the tests was faulty, for example? Then they could have just passed it onto the whole team, and then the players could have then passed it on to their families, which then puts everyone's life in danger. So then this brings me into this scenario. What happens if one player tests positive in the Premier League when all of this is going on? As you know, if you test positive, then you and your household has to self-isolate for 7 or 14 days, depending on who you are, and then everyone who you've been in contact with also has to self-isolate for 14 days. Now, what happens if just one player tests positive for this virus? then that basically means that the league has to shut down, especially if matches have already been played, because they have come into contact with all these players. That means that everyone has to go into self-isolation, and then the league can't resume, which automatically just puts the end to Project Restart, and then which would have wasted so much time, money, and could potentially cost lives. It is such a dangerous situation that the Premier League are trying to put the players and club staff through. And then again, there was also talk of the Premier League wanting to put all their players into quarantine, for example, where they're not allowed to see their families and they have to stay with the squad. Now, I know many players are in support of that, just to make sure that the season is concluded, but that means the players won't be able to see their family, their girlfriends, their children. That's terrible. How can you not let the players and coaching staff not see their family for potentially a couple of months? I don't see how that's fair to the players and staff. And then here's another scenario. What happens if you have a player that is living with someone that has a shielding letter and has to shield from society until further notice to protect themselves from the virus because they have a medical condition that will put them in severe danger if they catch the virus? What happens to those players then? Will they still be expected to play? Will they be allowed to stay with their family and not have to put themselves in a dangerous situation which may end up costing the lives of one of their loved ones? How does that work as well? The Premier League have already said that the players have to be tested twice a week to make sure that they test negative for the virus before they are allowed to play. Now, of course, I've touched on it before. What happens if one player tests positive? Then it just shuts down. But then put this in perspective. In England alone, there is only 30,000 tests per million people. Many people would think this is a good number and say, yeah, loads of people can get tested. Bearing in mind that is much lower than America, Germany, France, Ireland, and loads of other countries in the EU and around the world, which means we are testing much less people a day, yet they are expecting to test all these footballers and coaching staff when really the tests should be going to the people in England and all over the UK where the tests are needed. Yet, and take this for example, there are only about 1,000 tests per million per day in Wales. Now, bearing in mind that there was 200 people in attendance at the Riva Derby, Borussia Dortmund versus Schalke the other day, say there was 100 per club, that would mean that 200 people, both Cardiff and Swansea, had to test all of their players and coaching staff on one of the days. That would mean that 200 tests are used up in Wales, which would take it down to only 800 tests per day that the Welsh people have access to. How is that fair when we should be getting rid of this global pandemic and not potentially making it worse, where more lives could potentially be lost? But anyway, there are many teams that are trying to stop this plan, in particular the top 6 teams in the Premier League, who agree with the majority of the fans' thoughts about this, and there are also many players that have also come out criticising these plans. One in particular, Troy Deeney, who has come out and said today that he will not train or play under these plans just to ensure that his family are kept safe, and he doesn't think that he should be forced to play. But anyway, enough of me criticising Project Restart. There are many other scenarios that people are considering of how to finish the season. One of the scenarios is for the leagues to end it immediately and made null and void. This is popular. Well, this has already happened in the Netherlands. I completely butchered that. No, I'm not even going to bother saying it on the screen here. And as well as former Palace owner Simon Jordan, who has been a massive critic of things like Project Restart and how the league should be restarted. Now, basically, null and void means the season's cancelled. Liverpool won't be champions. The 3 teams in the bottom of the Premier League won't be relegated. And most importantly, West Brom and Leeds won't go up either. Now, in some cases, this does have its positives. For example, no one has to be put at risk by playing football. And we can just restart the league again in September, only if it is safe to do so. But then again, we have done over half of the season and Liverpool only needs one more win to be able to win the Premier League. How can you possibly not let Liverpool win the league at this point when they've done so hard all season, as well as West Brom and Leeds to push for promotion, and just cancel the season there like you've done in the Netherlands where the winner doesn't win the league? Liverpool have not won a title in almost 30 years now. How can you possibly take that away from them when almost 3/4 of the season has been finished? Then you say, nope, we just got to cancel it. That's a ridiculous idea and completely unfair to teams in the top half of the league, such as Liverpool, West Brom and Leeds. And not only that, it would be unfair for other teams who could potentially push for Europe in the Premier League as well, such as Sheffield United and Wolves. It's just not... I just don't see how this is fair at all, except for the clubs at the bottom half of the league where they won't be relegated. And another question that we got to consider with null and void is how will we, leading on from talking about the Europe, and also adding on from the European places, how will we decide who goes into Europe, for example? I mean, Tottenham aren't even in the European places at the moment, nor are Arsenal. Yet Sheffield United could potentially get into the Champions League. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but there is still a chance. By null and voiding the season and putting the teams that were already in there last year, how is that fair on teams such as Sheffield United and Wolves, who could potentially get in the Champions League. Another scenario that could be considered as well is to finish the season there, as it stands already. Happened in Scotland, yes, which is what Scotland voted on yesterday, which means Celtic are crowned champions, much to the disdain of Rangers, even though Rangers couldn't realistically catch Celtic anyway, although there was still a possibility. Hearts ended up being relegated, which angered a lot of Hearts fans because they could have stayed up even though they have been pants this season. Ultimately mean that Liverpool are crowned champions and that the bottom 3 teams in the Premier League, so Norwich, Aston Villa and Bournemouth, would end up getting relegated. Now there are many pros to this. Liverpool would end up getting the title, and teams such as Leicester and potentially Wolves will be able to get into their European competitions respectively. Although the main problem I have with this is if you end it there and allow relegation to happen, then put this into perspective. Aston Villa are currently in 19th place with 1 game in hand on 25 points. If they would have won their game in hand and then the season was ended, that would mean that they wouldn't get relegated. If we ended the season there and then, would that mean that Aston Villa would get relegated even though they have played less games and could potentially stay up if they had played the same amount of games as all the other teams in the league? That would just be completely unfair to Aston Villa fans, in my opinion. The same scenario would apply to the Championship as well, with who would end up getting into the playoffs, and also if the playoffs would even happen, would you just promote Leeds and West Brom, or would you allow a playoff competition to take place? It is really unknown what the plans would be under this particular idea. But anyway, now I'm going to talk about my opinion on how I think that these leagues should be resumed, if I think they should be resumed, that is anyway. Now my opinion is that the season should only be restarted when it is safe to do so. This could be September, October, or possibly next January if things continue to stay as bad as they currently are, and that decision should be ultimately when the UK decide to relax all of their social distancing guidelines, where you're allowed to be in contact with more and more people. So this could potentially mean if the season is restarted, then we could see crowds return. Although I wouldn't end up promising this, because we could end up seeing a second or even worse third peak of this virus if we all of a sudden let crowds return to football. Now this would obviously mean that the season would be finished as usual when it is safe to do so, of course, meaning that Liverpool would probably end up being crowned champions, which means that Liverpool would probably end up being crowned champions, Leeds and West Brom would end up getting promoted. I'd play the playoffs as usual, although I would say a no-no to relegation for this season, as I don't see how it would be fair to relegate any teams at all. Meaning that over the next 5 seasons, there would be simultaneously 1 less team in the Premier League until it gets back to the normal level of 20. Same with 24 in the Championship, and then you make the seasons longer and pre-season a little bit shorter for the time being, as these are unprecedented times. And then after the seasons have been concluded, I would then finish the cup competitions. So say for example the league gets restarted in September and it gets finished by the end of the year, then I'd have about a 4-week break, and then all of the cup competitions would then be finished. So for example the FA Cup, however, European competitions such as the Champions League and Europa League should only be continued if it is safe to do so, otherwise it should just be null and void. And obviously European football resuming would rely on if other countries' borders are open and if it is safe to travel between countries. Now really, to keep this as safe as possible, then I think in European matches they should really ban away fans and it should be home fans only. And now after the cup competitions are finished, this is probably one of the most controversial things I am ever going to say, but we should completely cancel next season. Now really, this is to ensure that the integrity of this season is finished, fully be able to happen, but the majority of the integrity of the league will be able to be completed. But if the conclusion of the season was to be delayed, then I don't see how we are able to have next season, especially considering that this needs to happen, that there is a huge backlog of international football that needs to be completed, which should happen after all the cup competitions are finished, and we have another, I'd say about 4-week break where all the players are able to go and play with and train with their countries. Some of the fixtures that need to be finished in this scenario would be the European qualifiers, the European qualifiers playoffs, which was meant to take place at the end of March, which would fill up the remaining European Championship places, which of course has now been delayed to 2021. All of the World Cup qualifiers that have already been cancelled, and then as well the Nations League, which UEFA really want to get concluded. So in that time, all of the backlog of international football should be completed, and then of course we have the European Championships that have to be played, as well as the Olympics, which should be played in their rearranged dates next year. And then after all that international football has been finished, and there is a lot of it, then we will be able to continue for the 2021-2022 season as normal, only of course if it is safe to do so. But anyway, that's my opinion on it. Pop it in the comments, guys, of course, what you think about it and any changes that you would add to my opinion for when the football season resumes. But anyway, to make a conclusion for this entire video, it would be unfair if Liverpool didn't end up winning the league title this year, and if the season ended up being null and void. There would be lawsuits flying everywhere, especially from Liverpool's end, who have not only been denied a league title, but also been denied a lot of cash money, which they truly do deserve. And the same in this scenario goes with Leeds and West Brom, who would also be denied a chance of Premier League football, which they have definitely earned this season. And as well, with these unprecedented times, it would be really unfair to relegate any teams and put them possibly in a worse financial situation, as we may see many clubs going under during these unprecedented times. But ultimately, the Premier League or EFL should not be started at all on the risk of someone's life, period. So guys, if you did enjoy this video, then please do leave a like, and if this is the first ever video you've seen by me, then please do consider hitting that subscribe button to see some more super cool content like this, and turn on the bell so you never miss an upload. I will try my best and upload more videos to this channel. If you want to see me make a particular video, then please do put it in the comments, guys, which will give me an idea of what sort of videos that you want me to upload, and then I will consider if I want to make that video or not. Follow all my social medias in the description below, and I'll see you all next time for another video. Au revoir.